Chapter 10 of the Book of Camping and Woodcraft, a guidebook for those who travel in the wilderness. Recording by Michelle Fry, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The Book of Camping and Woodcraft, a guidebook for those who travel in the wilderness by Horace Kephart. Chapter 10. Dressing and Keeping Game and Fish. Butchering is the most distasteful part of a hunter's work, a job to be sublet when you can, but sometimes you can't. When an animal is shot, the first thing to do is to bleed it. Even birds and fish should be bled as soon as secured. The meat keeps better, and in the case of a bird, the feathers are more easily plucked. Speaking now of large game, do not drop your gun and rush in on a dying beast to stick it, for it might prove an ugly customer in its death struggle. First put a bullet through its heart or spine. To cut a deer's throat would ruin the head for mounting. Twist its head to one side, with the throat downhill if possible, so that blood will not flow over the hide. Then stick your knife in at the point of the breast, just in front of the sternum or breastbone, and work the point of the knife 2 or 3 inches back and forth, close up to the backbone, so as to sever the great blood vessels. Then, if you must hurry on, perhaps after another animal, toss some brush over the carcass, or hang a handkerchief over it to suggest a trap, and make a brush blaze here and there as you go along to guide you back to the spot. If practicable, remove the entrails at once. To do this, it is not necessary to hang the animal up. If you are in a hurry, or if the camp is not far away, it will do merely to take out the paunch and intestines, but if this is neglected, putrefaction will soon set in. A bear especially will soon spoil, because the fur keeps in the vital heat, so that the body will smoke when opened, even after it has lain a long time in hard freezing weather. If the ground is not too rough, nor the distance too great, a deer may be dragged to camp over the snow or leaves, but drag it head foremost. If pulled the other way, every hair will act as a barb against the ground. Before starting, tie the front legs to the lower jaw. The carcass will slide easier, and the hide will not be so disfigured. If you first drop a bush or small tree by cutting through the roots, leaving a stub of a root projecting for a handle, then tie the animal on the upper side of the bush and drag away. To pack a deer on horseback, first, if your horse is green in the business, let him smell the deer, pet him, and if necessary, blindfold him until you get the carcass lashed in place. Even then you may have trouble. I have seen a mule get such a conniption fit at the smell of blood that he bucked himself, deer, and saddle off a cut bank into a swift river. The girth broke, and that saddle is going yet. Recinch your saddle, and if the deer is too heavy to lift upon the horse's back, fasten your picket rope to the deer's hind legs, throw the line over the saddle, get on the other side, and haul away until the deer's hocks are up even with the saddle. Then quickly snub the rope around the saddle horn, go around, swing the burden over the saddle, balancing it evenly, and lash it fast. Or if you wish to ride, move the deer behind the saddle and lash it there, bringing the legs forward on either side and tying them to the rings of the cinch. For thongs, cut strips from the skin of the deer's forelegs. Be sure to fasten the load securely so that it cannot slip, or you will have a badly frightened horse. By skinning the legs from hoofs to ankles, partly disarticulating the latter, then tying the legs snugly, they will not dangle and scare the horse, nor catch in underbrush. 2 men can carry a deer on a pole by tying its legs together in pairs, slipping the pole through, and tying the head to the pole. Unless the carcass is tied snugly to the pole, such a burden will swing like a pendulum as you trudge along, especially if the pole is at all springy. A more comfortable way is to make a litter of 2 poles by laying them parallel, about 2 1/2 feet apart, and nailing or tying cross pieces athwart the poles. Whittle the ends of the poles to a size convenient for your hands, and fasten to each end of the litter a broad strap, in such a way that it may pass over the shoulders of the carrier, and thus take up much of the weight. Then lash the animal securely to the top of the litter. One man can carry a small deer entire by dragging it to a fallen tree, boosting it up on the log lengthwise and back down, then grasping the hind legs with one hand and the forelegs with the other, and carrying the load so that its weight is on the back of his neck and shoulders. A better scheme is to cut a slit through the lower jaw and up through the mouth, and another slit through each of the legs between the tendons just above the hoof. Tie the head and legs together, but not too close, and then, by the loop thus formed, swing the burden over your shoulder. To carry a larger animal, pick a back, gut it, cut off the head, and hang it up to be called for later. Skin the legs down to the knees and hocks, skin off the shin bones, tie the skin of each foreleg to the hind leg on the same side, put the arms through the loops thus formed, and get up. Or remove the bones from the forelegs from knee to foot. Leaving the feet on, tie the hind legs together and the forelegs to them, thrust your head and one arm through, and carry the burden as a soldier does a blanket roll. When one has a long way to go and can only carry the hide and the choicer parts of the meat, the best way is to make up an Indian pack, as shown in the illustration. Skin the deer, place a stick athwart the inside of the skin, pack the saddles, hams, and tidbits in the latter, and roll up and tie in a convenient bundle. It is not necessary to hang a deer up to skin and butcher it, but that is the more cleanly way. One man, unassisted, can hang a pretty heavy animal in the following way. Drag it, head foremost, to a sapling that is just limber enough to bend near the ground when you climb it. Cut 3 poles, 10 or 12 feet long, with crotches near the ends. Climb the sapling and trim off the top, leaving the stub of one stout branch near the top. Tie your belt into a loop around the deer's antlers or throat. Bend the sapling down until you can slip the loop over the end of the sapling. The latter, acting as a spring pole, will lift part of the deer's weight. Then place the crotches of the poles under the fork of the sapling, the butts of the poles radiating outward, thus forming a tripod. Push first on one pole, then on another, and so raise the carcass free from the ground. If you do not intend to butcher it immediately, raise it up out of reach of roving dogs and varmints, and put a smudge under it of rotten wood, well banked with stones and earth, so that it cannot blow around and set the woods afire. The smudge will help to keep away blowflies and birds of prey. It is common practice to hang deer by jambrels with the head down, but when hung head up, the animal is easier to skin, easier to butcher, drains better, and does not drip blood and juices over the neck and head, which you may want to have mounted for a trophy. Dried blood is very hard to remove from hair or fur. If the skin is stripped off from rear to head, it will be hard to grain. The more common way of skinning a deer, when the head is not wanted for mounting, is to hang it up by one hind leg, and begin skinning at the hock, peeling the legs, then the body, and finally the neck, then removing the head with skin on for baking in a hole, after which the carcass is swung by both legs and is eviscerated. Now let us suppose that you have killed a deer far away from camp, and that you wish to skin and butcher it on the spot, saving all parts of it that are good for anything. You are alone. You wish to make a workmanlike job of it. You can carry only the choicer parts with you that evening, and must fix the rest so that it will not be molested overnight. Of course, you have a jackknife, and either a pocket hatchet or a big bowie knife, probably the latter, if this is your first trip. First, hang the deer as described above. By the time you are through cutting those poles with your knife, your hand will ache between thumb and forefinger. A tomahawk would have been better. Skinning. This is your first buck, and you wish to save the head for mounting. For this, the skin of the whole neck must be preserved, clear back to the shoulders. Clean away any blood that may have issued from the nose and mouth, and stuff some dry moss or other absorbent into the beast's mouth. Stick your big knife into a log alongside. It is only to look at for the present. Open your jackknife, insert the point, edge up where the neck joins the back, and cut the skin in a circle around the base of the neck, running from the withers down over the front of the shoulder blade to the brisket or point of the breast on each side. Do not skin the head at present. You may not have time for that. Insert the point of the knife through the skin over the paunch, and following the middle line of the chest, slit upwards to meet the cut around the neck. Then reverse, and continue to slit backwards to the end of the tail, being careful not to perforate the walls of the belly. Then slit along the inside of each leg from the hoof to the belly slit. If you wish to save the feet for mounting, be particular to rip the skin in a straight line up the under side of the leg, starting by inserting the point of the knife between the heel pads. Now comes a nice trick, that of severing the shanks. Nearly every inexperienced person starts too high. Study the accompanying illustrations of these joints, noting where the arrow points, which is the place to use your knife. In a deer, the joint is about 1.5 inches below the hock on the hind leg and 1 inch below the knee on the foreleg. Cut square across through the skin and muscles in front and similarly behind, then with a quick pull back against your knee, snap the shank off. The joint of the foreleg is broken in a similar manner, excepting that it is snapped forward. Having stripped the vertebra from the tail, now peel the skin off the whole animal, from the shoulders downward, assisted with your closed fist and, where necessary, with the knife, but wherever the knife is used, be careful to scrape the skin as clean as you can without cutting it, for every adhering bit of fat, flesh, or membrane must be thoroughly removed before the skin is ready for tanning, and that is easier to do now than after it dries. The whole operation of skinning is much easier while the animal is still warm than after the body has become cold. To skin a frozen animal is a desperately mean job. I have known 4 old hunters to work nearly a whole afternoon in skinning a frozen bear. The skin of the body and limbs having been removed, stretch it out flat, hair side down, alongside of you to receive portions of the meat as it is being butchered. Growlaching. Now take up your big knife, insert its point alongside the breastbone, and cut through the false ribs to the point of the sternum. In a young animal this is easy, but in an old one the ribs have ossified, and you must search for the soft points of union between the ribs and the sternum, which are rather hard to find. Here your knife's temper, and perhaps your own, will be put to the test. The most trifling-looking pocket hatchet would do this trick in a jiffy. Open the abdominal cavity, taking care not to rupture anything, and prop the chest open a few inches with a stick or by merely pulling the ribs away from each other. Cut the diaphragm free at both sides and at the back. It is the membrane that separates the organs of the chest from those of the abdomen. Everything now is free from the body except at the throat and anus. Reach in and take in your grasp all the vessels that run up into the neck. With knife in the other hand, cut them across from above downward, taking care that you do not cut yourself. Now pull away gradually, helping a little here and there with the knife until all the contents of the visceral cavity lie at your feet, save the lower end of the rectum, which is still attached. With the hatchet, if you had one, you would now split the pelvis. The thing can be done with a large knife, if the animal is not too old, by finding the soft suture at the highest part of the bone and rocking the knife edge on it. But you may not be able to accomplish this just now, so reach in with the jackknife, cut carefully around the rectum and urinary organs, keeping as close to the bone as possible, and free everything from the cavity. If water is near, wash out the abdominal cavity and let it drain. To remove the head, flay back the skin for several inches at the base of the neck, cut through flesh, etc., to the backbone. Search along this till you find the flat joint between the faces of 2 vertebrae. Separate these as far as you can, then twist the attached part of the body round and round until it breaks off. Directions how to skin a head for mounting are given in the chapter on trophies, etc. In butchering, save the liver, heart, brain, milt, spleen, kidneys, and caul fat. The caul is the fold of membrane loaded with fat that covers most of the intestines. In removing the liver, you need not bother about the gallbladder, for a deer has none. Many a tenderfoot has been tricked into looking for it. In the final cutting up, save the marrow bones, especially of elk, for eating, the ligaments that lie on either side of the backbone, from the head backward, for sinew thread, the hoofs for glue, if you are far from supply stores and expect to remain a good while, and perhaps the bladder, paunch, large intestine, and pericardium, outer skin of the heart, for pouches and receptacles of various kinds, and to make catgut. The scrotum of a buck, tanned with the hair on, makes a good tobacco pouch. If one is in a hurry and is not particular about the hide, he can do his butchering on the ground. In that case, lay the animal on sloping ground with its head uphill, or bend its back over a log or a rock, or turn it on its back with its head twisted around and wedged under one side. The old-time way of butchering a buffalo was to turn the carcass on its belly, stretching out the legs on either side to support it. A transverse cut was made at the nape of the neck. Then the workman gathered the long hair of the hump in one hand, separated the skin from the shoulder, laid it open to the tail along the spine, freed it from the sides, and pulled it down to the brisket. While the skin was thus still attached to the belly, it was stretched upon the ground to receive the dissected meat. Then the shoulder was severed, and the fleece, which is the mixed fat and lean that lies along the loin and ribs, was removed from along the backbone, and the hump ribs were cut off with a tomahawk. These portions were placed on the skin, together with the boudins from the stomach and the tongue. The rest of the meat was left to feed the wolves. In butchering an elk or moose that has antlers, first remove the head. Then turn the body on its back and prop it in position with a couple of 3-foot stakes sharpened at both ends, a hole being dug for a moose's withers. Sometimes only the haunches, sirloins, and tongue are saved, these being cut away without skinning or gutting the carcass. If a complete job of butchering is to be done, there must be a horse or several men with a rope to elevate the body. In this case, the lower legs are skinned, the shanks removed, the hide split from throat to tail, the sides skinned free, the windpipe and gullet raised, the pleura and diaphragm cut loose, and the carcass then raised high enough so that the hide can be removed from the rump and back. The rectum, small intestines, and paunch are then loosened and allowed to roll out on the ground. The gullet is cut, the liver taken out, and the diaphragm, lungs, and heart removed. Then the skinning is finished over the shoulders and arms. It is best not to cut up the meat until it is quite cold and firm. Then split the carcass in halves along the backbone, and quarter it, leaving one rib on each hind quarter. Bears are butchered in a similar manner, but without removing the head, of course. If a hide is to be preserved for some time in a green state, use nothing on it but salt. Spread it out flat, hair side down, stretch the legs, flanks, etc., and rub all parts thoroughly with salt, particular pains being taken to leave no little fold untreated. A moose hide will take 10 or even 15 pounds of salt. As soon as the salting is done, fold in the legs and roll the hide up. When a deer has merely been eviscerated and is hung up to be skinned and cut up at a more convenient season, prop open the abdominal cavity with a stick so that it may dry out quickly. If the weather is warm enough at any hour of the day for flies to come out, keep a smudge going under the carcass. It takes flies but a few minutes to raise Ned with venison. If blows are discovered on the meat, remove them, looking especially at all folds and nicks in the meat and around the bones, for the blows work into such places very quickly. As long as they have not bored into the flesh, they do it no harm. It may be said here that even smoked bacon is not immune from blows, and it should not be hung up without a cheesecloth cover. The fly that blows smoked meats is the same that starts skippers in cheese. Hornaday gives the following rule in his Natural History for computing the live weight of deer from the dressed weight. Add 4 ciphers to the dressed weight in pounds, and divide by 78,612. The quotient will be the live weight in pounds. Now for what Shakespeare calls small deer. I must take issue with Nessmuk on the art of skinning a squirrel. He says, quote, "Chop off head, tail, and feet with the hatchet, cut the skin on the back crosswise, and inserting the 2 middle fingers, pull the skin off in 2 parts, head and tail. Clean and cut the squirrel in halves, leaving 2 ribs on the hind quarters." End quote. The objection is that in this case you throw away the best part of the squirrel, the cheek meat and brain being its special tidbits. A better way is this. Sever the tail from below, holding your left forefinger close in behind it, and cutting through the vertebra close up to the body, leaving only the hide on the top side. Then turn the squirrel over and cut a slit down along each ham. Put your foot on the tail, hold the rear end of the squirrel in your hand, and pull, stripping the skin off to the forelegs. Peel the skin from the hind legs and cut off the feet. Then cut off the forefeet. Skin to the neck, assist here a little with the knife, then skin to the ears, cut off the butts of the ears, then skin till the blue of the eyeballs shows, and cut, then to the nose till the teeth show, and cut it off. Thus you get no hair on the meat, and the whole thing is done in less than a minute. Turkeys, geese, ducks, and grouse are usually dry picked. If this could be done while the bodies were still warm, it would be no job at all. But after they are cold, it generally results in a good deal of laceration of the skin, so much so that sometimes the disgusted operator gives up and skins the whole bird. It would be better to scald them first, like chickens. In dry picking, hang the bird up by one leg, pluck first the pinions and tail feathers, then the small feathers from shanks and inside of thighs, then the others. Grasp only a few feathers at a time between finger and thumb, as close to the skin as possible, and pull quickly toward the head. Then pick out all pin feathers and quills. Singe the down off quickly, so as not to give an oily appearance to the skin. Ordinarily, the down can be removed from a duck's breast by grasping the bird by the neck and giving one sweep of the open hand down one side of the body and then one down the other. In plucking geese or ducks, some use finely powdered resin to remove the pin feathers. The bird is plucked dry, then rubbed all over with the resin, dipped in and out of boiling water 7 or 8 times, and then the pin feathers and down are easily rubbed off. To draw a bird, cut off the head and the legs at the first joint. Make a lengthwise slit on back at base of neck and sever neck bone close to body, also the membrane which holds the windpipe. Make a lengthwise incision from breastbone to and around the vent so you can easily draw the insides, which must be done carefully so as not to rupture the gallbladder. The idea that ducks and other game birds should hang until they smell badly is monstrous. If you want to know where such tastes originated, read the annals of medieval sieges. A small trout is easily cleaned without washing by tearing out the gills and drawing the inside out with them. In a large trout, the gills should be cut free from the lower jaw and back of the head, and a slit cut along the underside from head to fin. The inside is then drawn out by the gills, leaving the fish clean within. To scale a fish, grasp it by the head, and using a knife that is not over keen, scale first one side and then the other with swift, steady sweeps. The scales below the gills and those near the fins are removed by moving the point of the knife acrosswise to the fish's length. Next, place the knife just below the belly fin, and with a slant stroke, cut off this, the side fins, and the head all in one piece. Then remove the back fin and the spine beneath it by making a deep incision on each side of the fin and pulling the latter out. The ventral part is removed in the same way. Open the fish, wash it in cold water, scrape off the slime, and then wipe it dry with a clean cloth or towel. Large fish, for broiling, should be split open. To skin a bullhead, cut off the ends of the spines, slit the skin behind and around the head, and then from this point along the back to the tail, cutting around the back fin. Then peel the two corners of the skin well down, sever the backbone, and holding to the corners of the skin with one hand, pull the fish's body free from the skin with the other. To skin an eel, nail it up by the tail at a convenient height, or impale it thus on a sharpened end of a little stake. Cut through the skin around the body, just forward of the tail, work its edges loose, then pull, stripping off the skin entire. Venison keeps a long time without curing, if the climate is cool and dry. To cure a deer's ham, hang it up by the shank, divide the muscles just above the hock, and insert a handful of dry salt. The meat of the deer tribe gets more tender and better flavored the longer it is hung up. In warm weather, dust flour all over the haunch or saddle of venison, sew it up in a loose bag of cheesecloth, and hang it in a shady place where there is a current of air. It will keep sweet for several weeks, if there is no crevice in the bag through which insects can penetrate. Ordinarily, it is best not to salt meat, for salt draws the juices. Bear meat, however, requires much salt to cure it, more than any other game animal. It is a curious fact that blowflies work close to the ground, and will seldom meddle with meat that is hung more than 10 feet above the ground. Game or fish suspended at a height of 20 feet will be immune from blows. To keep fish that must be carried some distance in hot weather, clean them as soon as you can after they are caught, and wipe them dry. Then rub a little salt along their backbones, but nowhere else, for salt draws the juices. Do not pile them touching each other, but between layers of cheesecloth, nettles, or basswood leaves. To keep fish in camp, clean, behead, and scale them, then string them by a cord through their tails, and hang them head down in a cool, dry, breezy place. To dry fish for future use, split them along the back, remove the backbones and entrails, salt the fish, and hang them up on a frame over a smudge until they are well smoked. Or make a trough by hewing out a softwood log, place the split fish in this, and cover them with a weak brine for 1 or 2 nights. Make a conical bark teepee on a tripod, suspend the fish in it, and dry and smoke them over a small fire for 3 days and nights. To ship rabbits, squirrels, etc., do not skin them, but remove the entrails, wipe the insides perfectly dry, wrap in paper, and pack them back down. Never pack birds or fish in straw or grass, for in damp or warm weather this will heat and sweat them. Do not let them freeze, as they will quickly spoil after thawing. Food in a bird's crop soon sours. The crop should be removed. To preserve birds in warm weather for shipment, draw them, wash the inside perfectly clean, dry thoroughly, and then take pieces of charcoal from the fireplace, wrap them in a thin rag, and fill the abdominal cavity with this. Also fill the bills, ears, eyes, and anal opening with powdered charcoal to keep off flies and prevent putrefaction. Reject all pieces of charcoal that are only half burnt or have the odor of creosote. Birds stuffed in this way will keep sweet for a week in hot weather. If you pack birds or fish in ice, wrap them first in many thicknesses of paper or grass so that no ice can touch them. Colonel Park gives the following method for packing fish that are to be transported a considerable distance, and says that it is also a good way to pack venison. Kill the fish as soon as caught, wipe them clean and dry, remove the entrails, scrape the blood off from around the backbone, remove the gills and eyes, wipe dry again, split the fish through the backbone to the skin from the inside, fill this split with salt. Spread the fish overnight on a board or log to cool. In the morning, before sunrise, fold the fish in dry towels so that there is a fold of towel between each fish and its neighbor. Carefully wrap the whole package in a piece of muslin and sew it up into a tight bag, and then in woolen blanketing, sewing up the ends and sides. Now put the roll in a stout paper bag, such as a flour sack. Fish prepared in this way can be sent from Maine to New Orleans in August, and it will remain fresh and nice. The methods of jerking venison, preparing trophies for mounting, curing pelts, and making buckskin will be described in the other chapters. End of Chapter 10.